As we know, every community that has immigrated to the U.S. has come with a story, with their narrative. And unfortunately, the narrative that the Sikh community has brought has been repression at the hands of the Indian government. That is what caused us to come here with our own American dream. Whereas oftentimes you hear about the American dream and you think of people who want to build their own home, people who want to buy their own car, people whose first generation will be the one to graduate from college. But the American dream that the Sikh community comes to America with is the dream to be able to speak freely. Speak freely about the repression that took place, the genocide in 1984 and the years that followed. I believe that my dream has come true, that here in Capitol Hill, in Washington, D.C., I'm able to speak freely, using my Bill of Rights, using my First Amendment, and with the help of the U.S. Constitution and the lawmakers, we are able to share the narrative and continue our story, and why it's super important for our future generations to know why we came to the U.S. and why just moving was not enough. As of last year, there were attempts to murder us, to physically harm us, the Sikh community in North America, and silence us. So we cannot share the truth. We cannot share the story. With that, I would like to give a big round of applause to our friend forever and ever, Congressman Greg Pence from Indiana. Congressman Greg Pence has been an ally to the Sikh community for years. The Pence family, even when Mike Pence was the governor and then later served the American public as their vice president. Help me welcome Congressman Greg Pence.
Thank you. Well, how was it getting here? Was that a lot of fun? I mean, you couldn't have picked a better day to come here. They've locked down the place, and the only time it'd ever be worse is if the president was coming. Okay, so that's interesting. It's always great to see you all. I do know the story. I know the story well about injustice and repression and threats. We got involved with Ballwinder on some issues, family matters, as well as some personal threats that I think we were able to help elevate, write some letters and get involved and help tell that story to the administration and the government. We have been friends, family friends, for quite some time. 6 years, 7 years, right? More than that, even going further back. You know, a lot of you know, and it's good to see a lot of familiar faces. I was in the petroleum business as well as a number of you are and have been. I'll keep fighting the remainder of time. The good news, in my opinion, is your issues back in your home country and some of the things that you're facing here are getting better and better known, and that's very important. I'd like to point out a couple of people. We have Michelle Davis from the Indiana 6th District. Well, I don't know what district you're. What district are you in?
58.
State legislator, state representative in Indiana. 58, a good friend of the Sikh community. And then my replacement, he's got to be elected first, but that's going to happen, is Jefferson Shreve. How about a round of applause for both these people? It's amazing to me. You know, we all have a story as immigrants. We all have a story of repression back home. My grandfather left Ireland. He had to leave Ireland. They tried to force him into Northern Ireland and fight against his own people. And he smuggled out of Ireland and came to Chicago a long time ago. And those issues back home, I think, have now been resolved. And I think partially with the help of the American government and, you know, people saying, hey, let's find peace. Let's find a way for people to work together and not and not bother people here in the United States. Once you're an American citizen or on your path to citizenship, you should be free to live the way you want here in the United States. So I just want to say thank you for coming. Good luck getting out of here, huh? It's going to be, that'll probably be a little easier than getting in. Was it hard getting in? We had to bring you in, right? Huh? Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I think the Sikh Assembly of America is a great organization. Are you all part of that? I'm not that familiar with the audience. Yes? Yes. Good. I'm here to support you, support the Assembly, and will continue to do so. And so thank you for coming today. Did you want to say anything else?
I just need you to assure the public, so that we have Sikhs coming in from all parts of America here. They need to hear from you that the U.S. government is doing something to protect them from the repression, from the transnational repression by the Indian government.
Well, I think communication, and I can't speak for the U.S. government, okay? I got to be very careful about that, especially with Cameron, yes. Okay? I know I have, right? And I will continue. And the most important thing you can do if you're not in the Indiana 6th District or in the 58th, is continue to be involved in the process, in the legislative process, back home, and communicate, let people know what the issue is. Don't assume that people in your district or where you're from understand what's going on. Get involved, and I know Ballwinder has, I know the family has, and continue to do that, okay? You've got a great story to tell. Just get out and tell it to your elected officials, okay, back home. I think we got some people from New Jersey, you said. Is it? New Jersey, New York, New York, California. Virginia, yeah. Maryland. Do it, okay? Be engaged with your politicians back home. Let them know what's going on. It's a phenomenal story. We sat at a Starbucks one afternoon, and I got to hear what was happening to an individual in my district, and then we shared that with other people. And then that, of course, Canada, what was happening up there, kind of the position they took. So tell your story. And that's what the Sikh, which your organization does. Keep doing that, okay? And with that, thank you for coming, huh? Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Pence, for not just attending the event, but also helping us enable so we were able to do this event. Your staff is just phenomenal. The amount of help that we have received from Congressman Greg Pence's office is truly remarkable. We have never seen a group of people work so hard that even though there were last-minute curves being thrown at us, be it security apparatus or anything, but they have been there for us. We truly appreciate your help. Let's go ahead and give a big round of applause to all the staff members from Congressman Greg Pence's office. As we continue with our program and as I welcome our next speakers, I would like to go ahead and mention a few names. We have Adam Schiff's office being represented by Steve Park. We have Ms. Dhaliwal representing Jennifer Wexton's Congressional 10th District from Virginia. Help me welcome her as well. And I will be mentioning the other names as well. I do apologize. We also have Mr. John Lynch representing Congressman Jim Costa's 21st Congressional District from California. I know all of you have been extremely patient with us. As we continue with our narrative, with our stories, I do want to mention just one small example of how the transnational repression continues to this day. A gentleman who could not be here because, quite honestly, he's afraid. He's saying that he's not trying to get a whole lot of attention. He's a blue-collar worker in California, and I have been to his congressional district office, and it's truly heartbreaking when you hear that he has a 17-year-old son, a wife, and two parents who are still in Punjab, India, and the amount of harassment and torture that they have to go through. What they do is the Intelligence Bureau in India just randomly calls his family members and asks them to come to the local police station. They make them wait from the morning till sunset, and then they just tell them to go home. In the past, they have asked them to provide his work address, his residential address, and where he even parks his rig in California. So this is happening right now. What we're saying is not something, it could have started in 1978 or 1984, but this is something that still continues to this day, and we have real life victims. And we have victims who are so afraid that they cannot even come to the podium and at least speak like I am able to do so. They're afraid that they're going to lose their family members who are in India. And when the family members ask them, why do you harass us? Why do you call us every day, every other week to come to the police station? And the only thing that they ask for is, ask your loved one to shut their mouth. That is a direct violation of our First Amendment. That is a direct violation of our Bill of Rights. That is a direct violation of our Constitution, our God-given rights. Let's put an end to this. We know that coming to Congress halls and coming to these events in D.C. is not easy. We truly appreciate, from the bottom of my heart, that you all are able to come here in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, passing through all those barriers. It's not easy, but trust me, it is important. The 56 signers who signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776, you want to know what kind of barriers they had to go through? One of them had merchant ships that were sunk by the British Navy. Most of them lost their homes. Their sons were killed. Their belongings were taken. But they stood on the righteous path. They did it for the nation. They did it for the good of humanity. And as we take that oath, when we raise our hand, when we become naturalized citizens, our allegiance is to the U.S. Constitution. And we have to serve the U.S. Constitution. And what a lot of people thought that what the Sikhs were narrating was limited to the boundaries of Punjab or the political boundaries of India and South Asia. But that is not the case anymore. The repression is no longer limited to those boundaries. The repression is threatening our democracy, is threatening our republic here in Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, if we truly want to make sure that our future generations continue to enjoy the freedoms granted by the home of the free and land of the brave, we need to fight. We need to keep up the advocacy work. Help me welcome our next speaker, Peter Friedrich, who's made here all the way from Connecticut. Thank you so very much. Help me welcome Peter Friedrich.
Good afternoon, and pardon my sweaty sheen. I hope it indicates my level of passion on this topic getting here. 3 months ago in April, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, while campaigning for re-election, passionately declared to his supporters, "Today, even India's enemies know this is Modi, this is the new India. This new India," said Modi, "comes into your home to kill you." Days later, Modi repeated the promise with another message to India's enemies, interpreted by Modi's regime today as basically being anyone who offers the mildest criticism of the human rights crisis for which he himself is responsible. He roared, "India no longer sends documents, it kills enemies in their homes." And the scary part about Modi's words is that they are not hollow rhetoric. Nor was he offering sincere assurances of what he might do in the future. No, Modi was boasting about what he has already done in the very recent past, and certainly what he will try to do again in the near future if no one holds him accountable. Modi was bragging about how his authoritarian regime has already entered the home of one of its critics in Canada and killed him. Modi was bragging about how his regime tried to enter the home of one of its critics in the United States to kill him. While running for re-election in India, Modi was issuing a brazen threat to North America about how his new India will eagerly chase down anyone abroad who tries to hold him accountable and gun them down. In June of last year, just 2 days before Modi got the red carpet rolled out for him for an official state visit to the U.S., killers apparently hired by Indian intelligence services assassinated Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada. A week after Modi departed the U.S. last year, a man accused of plotting the assassination of American Sikh activist Gurpatwant Singh Panun was arrested. According to evidence uncovered by the Washington Post, that man, who is now facing charges in a New York City court, was operating on direct orders from at least one identified officer with RAW, India's equivalent of the CIA, and was probably authorized to assassinate an American citizen on American soil with direct approval of India's highest level intelligence officials. So believe Modi when he says the new India comes into homes of foreign critics to kill them. Transnational repression has become yet another of the major markers of the rampant authoritarianism of Modi's new India, and how those physically threatened by it are no longer just people living within India's borders. According to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, transnational repression occurs when states use intimidation, harassment, or violence against those living outside their borders. Transnational repression campaigns often target political and human rights activists, journalists like myself, and members of religious and ethnic minority groups. In extreme cases, tactics include detention, reprisals against family members, kidnapping, or, as illustrated by India, assassinations. In the case of India, it's not like we, and when I say we, I mean the entire apparatus of the US government, didn't already know about the warning signs of transnational repression by India long before things crossed over to the point of an attempted assassination. For instance, Vox recently named just a handful of examples that occurred well before that attempted assassination. An American charity leader who spoke out on Indian human rights violations saw his Indian employees arrested en masse. An American journalist who worked on a documentary about India was put on a travel blacklist and deported. An American historian who studies 17th century India received so many death threats that she could no longer speak without security. Even a member of Congress and vocal critic of the Modi regime said she was concerned about being banned from India to visit her parents. As Vox put it, these are actually the more commonly employed subtle forms of harassment which India employs and which fly under the public radar. And I can attest to that. You see, as I've spent years documenting the activities of American entities which are sympathetic to the Modi regime, as well as how fellow American critics of both the Modi regime and its supporters here in America routinely face harassment, a major goal of my work has been to prevent these things from flying under the public radar. As a result of the years that I have spent doing that, I then had the chance to personally experience transnational repression by the Modi regime in one of those subtler ways which did fly under the public radar until it was exposed by the Washington Post last year. And I can tell you, that personal experience of transnational repression is not fun. Well, today the conversation has moved to transnational repression. For years I was doing and have been doing investigative journalism about a subtle form of foreign interference by the Modi regime, arguing that evidence shows that multiple members of and candidates for US Congress are intimately associated with groups and individuals who appear to operate primarily as American advocates for Modi's Hindu nationalist agenda. And my reporting did not go unnoticed. In 2021, months after my reportage exposed the Hindutva Hindu nationalist ties of a US congressional candidate, the Indian government itself stepped in to target me with a 1-2 attack. First, a shadowy group called Disinfo Lab published a 100-page dossier on me, exposing details about my family, personal history, accusing me of working for Pakistani intelligence, and so on. The same day that the report was released, the Delhi police held a press conference accusing me of connections to terrorists and implying that I was the mastermind behind a PDF social media toolkit, which taught people how to talk about the then ongoing farmers' protest. They stated that I have been on the radar of Indian intelligence agencies since 2006. On the radar indeed. Well, later investigative reporting by the Washington Post unearthed that the Disinfo Lab outlet which targeted me is actually a covert Indian intelligence operation run by a raw officer. As WAPO explained, the Disinfo Lab has often served as a rapid reaction force to counter criticisms of the Modi government that have attracted international attention or to preempt anticipated flack. Now, aside from myself, Disinfo Lab has run massive smear campaigns against major American advocacy organizations like Hindus for Human Rights and Indian American Muslim Council, against USCIRF, and even against members of Congress like Pramila Jayapal. Disinfo Lab's propaganda has been amplified here in America by American Hindu nationalist entities, including groups like Hindu Pact and Hindu Action, groups which have a presence here on the Hill and are very influential currently with particular sitting members of Congress. This propaganda has also been amplified by BJP politicians back in India for the purpose of, to quote Hindus for Human Rights, escalating a transnational campaign to silence an organization of progressive Hindus with a global audience. In one particular incident last year, a BJP leader shared a Disinfo Lab graphic targeting H4HR's co-founder. When his post went viral, a BJP minister hosted an entire press conference about the issue, accusing the American H4HR of being involved in a global conspiracy to destroy India. This incident was, to quote H4HR, exemplary of the Indian government's harassment of journalists, activists, and politicians in the US who challenged the Indian government's policies. Modi's New India, though, is not just targeting American advocacy groups, but it is also going after American reporters. Last year, for example, after journalist Sabrina Siddiqui attended the White House's press conference with Modi and questioned him about the status of human rights in India, the BJP's digital hit squads came after her with such an onslaught of threats that the White House itself was forced to step in and speak out against her harassment. But it's not just digital hit squads, raw propaganda campaigns, and attempted assassinations. Transnational repression by Modi's New India comes in all shapes and sizes. And sometimes it looks like intimidation in American streets. For example, in 2002, a bulldozer was deployed at an India Day parade in New Jersey. Hanging from the bulldozer were pictures of Modi as well as of Yogi Adityanath, the notorious chief minister of India's most populous state, where the bulldozer is being used to routinely and extrajudicially demolish the homes, businesses, and religious sites of Muslims, particularly those known for their dissent. And the bulldozer kicked up a dust storm. Its presence in the parade was swiftly and roundly denounced, including by both of New Jersey's senators, who declared, "The bulldozer has come to be a symbol of intimidation against Muslims and other religious minorities in India, and its inclusion in this event was wrong." But what most of the reportage missed was the transnational repression aspect of that incident. You see, marching directly ahead of the bulldozer was a contingent of the Overseas Friends of the BJP, the U.S. wing of India's BJP, which is an organization registered as a foreign agent here in America. And the man serving as Grand Marshal for the entire parade was a BJP spokesperson from India. So inclusion of the bulldozer was no accident. It was intended to intimidate. And its presence in American streets was almost certainly an orchestrated plan of India's BJP. Transnational repression also looks like radical hate mongers from India being hosted by American Hindu nationalist outfits. And one prominent example we saw in 2022 was when Sadhvi Ratambra was invited over here for a national tour, Ritambra from India is best known as the most aggressive organizer of a mob of 100,000 people who destroyed a historic mosque in 1992, an incident which sparked the subsequent massacre of thousands of Indian Muslims. She is also known for anti-Christian campaigns in which she declares that Christians will be wiped out from the face of India. And she's just one example of such hate-mongering Hindu nationalist demagogues who are being brought over here to spread poison and fear amongst the Indian diaspora. But the new India's transnational repression goes beyond intimidation in the American streets. It also includes interference in American legislation. Last year, for instance, after the California state legislature passed a bill banning caste discrimination, the only thing required was for Governor Gavin Newsom to sign it into law. Instead, the governor vetoed the bill at the last minute after a few prominent Indian Americans twisted his arm not to. But guess what the common denominator was between all of those people who twisted his arm? They are all connected to the overseas friends of the BJP, the foreign agent of India's BJP. Earlier in 2020, an unethical alliance between a prominent American Hindu nationalist groups, entities, and the Indian consulate generated massive pressure on the Chicago City Council to crush a resolution which denounced India's Discriminatory Citizenship Amendment Act. Key Hindu nationalist leaders behind that campaign are, once again, also involved in that registered foreign agent, the Overseas Friends of the BJP. Now, moving beyond digital hit squads and real-world assassination attempts, intimidation in American streets, and interference in legislation, and more, we could also touch briefly on electoral interference, or at least the threat of it. See, during the 2020 U.S. presidential election, another thing that here went under the public radar in America, but made headlines in India, during the 2020 presidential election, a BJP spokesperson in India openly threatened on Twitter, now X, to interfere, his words, in the election in response to Senator Bernie Sanders being critical about the human rights situation in India. In 2019, as then President Trump campaigned for re-election, he joined Modi on stage. And as he joined Modi on stage, and we had a sitting president running for re-election, Modi stood next to Trump and declared that Ab ki bar Trump Sarkar, translated to once more the Trump administration, a foreign leader on American soil endorsing a sitting president for re-election. Whatever your opinion is of Trump, that's inappropriate. There's so much more we could talk about. We could talk about how, for instance, the Indian government pressured a library in Connecticut in 2019 to remove a memorial display donated by local Sikhs. Or we could talk about how the Indian consulate worked to block a 2016 resolution by the Fresno, California City Council recognizing the 1984 Sikh genocide. Or how the Hindu American Foundation, which is very active here on the Hill, and is widely perceived as a pro-Hindu nationalist outfit, how they so extensively lobbied against a congressional resolution which criticized Modi and Modi's Hindu nationalist violence that one congressional staffer said, Hindu American Foundation are definitely trying to undermine anyone in Washington who is critical of Modi. Yes, the very same Modi who campaigns now, today, with the assurance that the new India comes into the homes of his critics living abroad in order to kill them. So throughout all of these varied forms of transnational repression we're facing here in America, one of the worst outcomes is the chilling effect which it creates. And to quote John Sifton of Human Rights Watch, Indian Americans who are against the BJP or who oppose the BJP have been intimidated and as a result routinely engage in self-censorship. There are prominent Indian American intellectuals, writers, and celebrities who simply will not speak out against Modi because they are afraid that by doing so they will subject themselves to a torrent of online abuse and even death threats. Something which I have personally witnessed even among citizens, end quote. Even among citizens, U.S. citizens. I can personally attest to the truth of that. Having heard over years from Indian Americans of all backgrounds, how they do despise the direction that Modi has taken India, but they are hesitant to say anything out of fear of the backlash they might face. And yes, that fear is present among Indian Americans who hold U.S. citizenship and who therefore ought to have no fear whatsoever of freely exercising their First Amendment rights without any repercussions. And so what is to be done? Well, to quote USCIRF Commissioner David Curry, within its own borders, Indian authorities have repeatedly used draconian legislation like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and anti-conversion laws to systematically crack down on religious minorities, journalists, and activists, extending this repression to target religious minorities from India living abroad, including intimidation tactics against journalists, is especially dangerous and cannot be ignored. Well, it's not being ignored in some circles. Last month, for instance, a coalition of U.S. senators led by Jeff Merkley warned that the Biden administration must react to this most egregious example of transnational repression, the plotted assassination of an American citizen on American soil, with much more than hollow rhetoric. The administration, they say, must match words with actions to hold Indian officials accountable and to send a clear message that there will be consequences for such behavior, they said. And they warned of India's increasingly irresponsible efforts to silence critics of its government among its diaspora around the world. They declared the U.S. must be firm and resolute in opposing transnational repression, no matter the perpetrator. No matter the perpetrator. No matter the trade deals or the arms deals, or the supposed shared values, or the geopolitical ambitions. No matter what vision the U.S. has for our relationship with India. If India puts out a hit on one of our citizens, that is not just cause for pause. No, that is cause for completely reevaluating the relationship from the ground up. And that is particularly the case considering that many months after Modi's regime was accused of plotting the assassination of an American critic, many months after he was accused of that plotted assassination, Modi went on the campaign trail to brag about how the new India comes into the homes of foreign critics to kill them. And so what should members of the U.S. Congress be doing in response to all of this? It's a very simple three things. First, co-sponsor existing legislation to combat transnational repression, specifically the Transnational Repression Policy Act. Second, take further action by speaking on the floor, both in support of the Transnational Repression Policy Act, as well as against India's New India approach of engaging in transnational repression against Americans. Third, consider going further by introducing a resolution specifically censuring India for daring to engage in these sorts of activities. Oh, and I almost forgot the fourth thing that U.S. Congress can do. Remember that when Modi says his new India comes into the homes of his foreign critics to kill them, he means it. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Peter. Thank you for being so fearless. Thank you for not mincing or dicing your words. Thank you for being straightforward. Ladies and gentlemen, it's often asked, whenever we do something, what is in it for me? That's often the selfish question that we ask ourselves. Why should I take a day off and go to Capitol Hill on a hot summer day and be harassed by the security officials But the answer is, if we don't, then who will? We're here talking about a third world problem, a repressive regime that is threatening our democracy here in the U.S. Peter is not a Sikh. Peter has no relationship with India. But we should not just stop there. If we quit helping each other out, if we forget that we all are humans first, then this world would be a very scary place. And that is oftentimes when we speak of atrocities committed by these repressive regimes, be it Iran, be it China, be it Russia, be it India, be it North Korea, what they say is that it's in the interest of our national security. But we need to counter that narrative. This is the 21st century. People never thought that Hitler would be able to do what he did in the 20th century. And he did. And the world just stood by. And the genocides continue to happen. Be it Kashmir, be it Manipur, where the Kuki tribes who are of the Christian faith, they were massacred mercilessly last year at the hands of the Indian government. Let me tell you something. We often say that the U.S., although a secular nation, is a Christian majority country. Then we need to ask our lawmakers here in Washington, D.C., why do churches get vandalized on a daily basis in India? Why is it that Bibles get burned every Christmas in India? Why is it that Father Graham Staines was burned along with his 2 juvenile sons in India? Why is it that their killer was let go, who is a BJP worker? And not only that, they rewarded him by electing him to the Indian Parliament. Somebody who has the blood of Christians on their hands. If we continue to wait, that I will wait until other Sikhs are getting attacked, or I will wait until other Muslims are attacked, or I will wait until people of other faith or people of no faith are attacked, there will be nobody left to fight. We will have no allies left. As we continue our program, we will be here until 2 o'clock. However, I do want to take a short break, so we all could just go ahead and take refreshments. We still have about a group of 10 to 15 people who are waiting downstairs for the security apparatus to get better. The motorcade is supposed to be coming in any time, and then they will be allowed to come in. Thank you once again, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Peter. And as we go with the program, we did have some technical difficulties. We do have a video from the USCIRF commissioner speaking on this issue, how Sikhs are being targeted in North America at the hands of the Indian government. Please stay tuned. It's just a little bit longer. I truly appreciate you all took the time out to be here, so be patient with us. Thank you so very much. It is often said that your faith is put to test. And human rights is one of those fields where the repressive regimes test your faith on a daily basis. Sometimes the targets are Sikhs, sometimes the targets are Muslims, Jews, and oftentimes as Christians as well. We have among us a special guest, somebody who is here from New York. Please help me welcome Reverend Peter Cook, who is the Executive Director for New York State Council of Churches. Help me welcome Peter Cook.
Thanks, Greetings, my name is Peter Cook. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Council of Churches. We represent about 7,500 congregations across the state of New York, from the tip of Long Island to Buffalo to the southern tier, and of course New York City, Long Island. I'm personally based in the capital in Albany. And it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I am here with my colleague, the Reverend Neil Christie, who is head of the Federation for Indian American Christian Organizations of North America, or otherwise known as FIACONA. And I'm on their board, and we partner together in really trying to stand up to all forms of persecution against religious minorities. I really joined this conversation today with a deep concern about the scourge of religious nationalism, whether it be in the United States or in other countries, whether that be India or Israel or Pakistan or Hungary or any place pretty much that tries to take a religion and make it its own, and then to impose that religion on others by discriminating against their citizenry. I come to you with a few personal experiences around this scourge of religious nationalism. In 2018, I led a delegation of Christians to go to India. We showed up in the Chennai airport in 2018 and were roundly interrogated by the security personnel. And basically, when they found out that we were Christian, they denied us entry, put us back on a plane, and sent us home. We lost all of our money. We were completely demoralized by that situation, but it certainly got my attention. I think that some of the reasons that we were turned down at the Indian airport have to do with the Indian government's worry that Christians would take a stance against casteism, that we would fight and support Dalits in India, that we would bring money from the United States to in some way help religious minorities in India and secure their favor, which made them very nervous, and also that we would in some way advocate for human rights and justice. Also, they are very suspicious of Christians who they worry about converting people of other faiths to Christianity. And by the way, their definition of conversion is pretty loose. Like, if I'm nice to you and give you some food, I'm trying to convert you to Christianity. So they're not really very bright when it comes to what Christianity is all about. So I bring that experience. I did go back in 2019 to India, and I resolved after being there for 2 weeks that when I came back to the United States, I was going to do everything in my power to try to speak out against the scourge of Indian nationalism, and that's what we continue to do today. I guess a second sort of experience that I've had personally is that my wife was born in East Jerusalem, and her father was there as a Christian missionary to resettle Palestinian refugees. And he devoted his life to this work, eventually becoming the Middle East Secretary for the National Council of Churches, a fierce advocate for Palestinian rights. And so it's a very personal family issue for us, and when we have spoken out about this, not unlike the students at Columbia University or wherever, we get harassed. We have people say nasty things up to us on Facebook. If we come to public hearings, we're called anti-Semitic, and it's part of the general apparatus of intimidation which gets used by the Israeli government to go after anyone who speaks against the occupation. And in that case, we have Zionism, or maybe another word would be Jewish nationalism. And so now, here we are together with my friends from the Sikh community, and you know intensely what it's like to live in India, to have your loved ones threatened for speaking out for your rights, and then to come here to the United States and have that repressive apparatus follow you, people who spy on you, people who will plot for your assassination, people who will use pretty much all of the technology which is used by the Israeli government and also the Hindu government to intimidate and suppress speech. And so that really brings us to this whole question of transnational repression. This affects everybody. And often when we try to talk about this, they say, oh, well, that's a problem for the Sikhs, or that's a problem for the Christians, or that's a problem for Muslims, or whatever, and they don't make the connections. But really, what religious nationalism is all about, and the pairing with transnational repression, is about power. It's about wealth. It's about really holding on to your position in the caste system, and I use that word very well defined, and to really exploit poor people who are disenfranchised to further your ends. And it's all tied into a whole military-industrial apparatus as well. That's what this is really about. And what we do is we happen to just use religion as a way to put lipstick on a pig and make it look like this comes out of some deep religious conviction. And it is not. And so I guess the final thing I would just say is that the United States government is really bad at being a Christian theologian. The Hindu nationalist government is really bad at understanding what Hinduism is all about. The Israeli government is really bad about understanding what Judaism is all about. But they use, and certainly within the United States, we really struggle here with, it's an enormous fight. Hey, you're a Christian nation. Well, what that means is that maybe we're informed by Christian values, but if you are committed to Christian values, that means that you are advocating for the rights of everyone to be able to practice their faith because you see in them the incarnation and the image of God. So that would be my closing statement, and it's so nice to be here with all of you. And Neil, do you want to say a quick word?
Thank you, Reverend Cook. Very, very briefly, really more a word of appreciation and greetings on behalf of an organization that stands with you, the Federation of Indian American Christian Organizations of North America, FIACONA. Christians, as some of you may know, represent about 1 million in number in North America, Canada, and the United States. That's not an insignificant number. With that number and with that diversity within the Christian community, what we call ecumenism or ecumenical community, we have Catholics, we have Protestants, we have persons who belong to free churches, charismatic churches. What they all have in common in the context of our conversation today is a desire and a commitment, and we hope through the mechanisms of FIACONA to address transnational violence, oppression, but ultimately the root causes of where that violence is coming from. And so I'd like to really simply remind us of the kind of work that we are called to. FIACONA is an organization that stands with other religious minority groups that have been minoritized in the United States, in India, groups that have been historically marginal, not only because of their number, but because of their economic status. While they may have generated quite a bit of wealth for their country, as in the case of India, that wealth is not returned to the people. And in increasing situations, the land is being taken from the people, as in the case of Sikh farmers. And that desire then to migrate out of safety, to find sanctuary. Most people in the United States have no idea that Sikhs are the third largest immigrant group now, coming across the border out of desperation. The need for security, the need for safety for themselves and their family. These are issues that the United States will be grappling with for the decades ahead as we see demographic shifts. So FIACONA is really poised to work alongside the Sikh community, alongside Muslim communities, along progressive Hindu communities, and other communities that are, again, underrepresented typically in the public conversation in the U.S. And I would like to just piggyback on what Reverend Cook was saying. And this really has to do with religious nationalism. Religious nationalism. You may have heard the term Christian nationalism. More and more is being written about it from the context of from political pundits will speak about it. They're not speaking about Christian nationalism and as a worshiping community, but as an ideology, a political ideology. Some of you have understood that Zionism is a form of religious nationalism that continues to prop up illegal occupation of Palestine and the illegal war that continues to occur in Gaza. We know that Christian nationalism has been used in Europe and in the United States to repress minoritized peoples, including people who claim to be Christian, but who are not of the brand of Christianity that the Christian nationalists would espouse. So where we are approaching this conversation and are eager to have this conversation along with our Sikh siblings, brothers and sisters, is what are the root causes of religious nationalism? First, what does it look like in our communities? Each one of you is representing a particular geographic community within the United States now. Each one of you has representatives in the halls of Congress, both in the Senate and in the House. And you are in a privileged position in that you are able to speak directly with them and with their staff. And it is a great privilege on their part to be able to hear from you what your priorities are and what your experience is of religious nationalism as it's been directed toward the Sikh community in the United States. And so we are interested in having conversations across the United States, community by community, to look at how religious nationalism is impacting the Sikh community. Second, to consider what the resources are within our own faith communities that can counter the tactics of religious nationalism. And so that's the second part of the conversation that we're eager to have, Fiacone is eager to have, in partnership with the New York State Council of Churches. How is it that our communities are responding to religious nationalism? So whether it is a act of violence that has been perpetrated against those who are in worship, or whether it's a form of economic violence that's being perpetrated against the Sikh community, or an experience that's happening in the public schools, the public space, and that harms your freedom of expression, your freedom of religion, your freedom of conscience. And then finally, how is it that we can best organize laws, legislation that will address the root causes of religious nationalism? And we have laws that are being considered by Congress right now. Some of them are bipartisan. They're good pieces of legislation. But I'm convinced there's legislation that has not yet been written. And it needs to be written by our siblings from the Sikh community and from the Christian community, working alongside other religious minorities in the United States, representing the needs of India and representing the needs of communities here in the United States. So we look forward to working with you. We are deeply grateful for the invitation to be among you. Your leadership is a tremendous gift to the larger community, Indian community. My family is originally from Gujarat. I grew up as a child visiting India, where our neighbors were Sikh, we're Muslim, we're Hindu, and we're Christian. And that is the India that I celebrate. Those are the memories I have from my childhood. And I am committed to advocating for that vision, not only in India, but that vision in the United States, where, again, we are under direct threat by religious nationalists who would like to see us divided. We are under direct threat. So you're coming together today, and you're visioning what the future could look like is really a gift to all of your interfaith partners, and I want to say thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you once again so very much, Reverend Peter Cook and Neil Christie. Neil Christie was able to join us last month as well, as we here at Capitol Hill remembered the victims of 1984 June massacre. It's been 40 years, folks. That's 2 generations. That's 2 generations of trauma that we carry every single day as we wake up and we go to work and we go on with our worldly duties. This needs to end. All what we're seeking for is justice and putting an end to this repression. Be it repression within India's boundaries, or be it repression here in the Western world, where we are granted some God-given rights, and one of those rights is the freedom of speech, which was being violated, and it still continues to be violated at the hands of the Indian government. Next, we will be playing a video. This is remarkable that U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, commonly known as USCIRF Commissioner Mahmood, has sent a message to the Sikh community that we're not alone. We have partners, we have allies, and we have help on the way to carry our story, our narrative to the Western world and have some concrete results at the end where the community will feel alleviated of their burden, the burden that they carried when they left Punjab, the burden that one day we will have justice. And it seems like that goal is achievable now. Let me go ahead and play the video. These are remarks from USCIRF Commissioner Mahmood for the Sikh community and Sikh Assembly of America.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Asif Mahmood, a commissioner at the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF. Thank you very much to the Sikh Assembly for America for hosting this event today and for inviting me to be part of it. As many of you know, USCIRF is an independent, bipartisan U.S. federal government body that is dedicated to promoting the universal right to freedom of religion or belief abroad. Throughout the year, we monitor religious freedom conditions abroad and make policy recommendations to the President, Department of State, and Congress. The topic of today's discussion on India's transnational repression is timely and is a matter of deep concern as governments reach across borders to silence dissent. Transnational repression by governments can take the form of targeted abductions, enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, unlawful deportations, abuse of consular services, and targeting and collective punishment of relatives. It can also include online harassment and, in more severe cases, targeted killings. Increasingly, transnational repression has been used by governments to target religious minorities and religious freedom advocates. Notably, in November 2023, the United States Department of Justice published an indictment alleging the Indian government's involvement in the attempted assassination of a Sikh activist, Gurpantwant Singh Pannu, in New York, echoing similar actions in Canada. The indictment suggests that this plot was intended to prompt a series of additional killings of religious minorities in the United States and Canada. The US government has since urged its Indian counterparts to conduct a thorough investigation. USCIRF has repeatedly expressed alarm about these accusations and other efforts by the Indian government to silence individuals abroad fighting for religious freedom and other related human rights. These are serious accusations, but it's important to recognize that they did not occur in a vacuum. Instead, they reflect a dangerous and deteriorating climate for religious freedom conditions in India. Since 2020, USCIRF has recommended the State Department designate India as a country of particular concern, or CPC, for its systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom. We made this recommendation again most recently in our 2024 annual report, which highlights a number of religious freedom violations at a local, state, and national levels in India, including targeted attacks against Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and Dalits, and indigenous and scheduled tribal people. Over the last year, members of ruling BJP have used the perpetuated hateful rhetoric against religious minorities, especially Muslims and Christians, which has emboldened vigilante violence and attacks against places of worship. In 2023, NGOs reported nearly 700 incidents of violence against Christians alone, who continued to be detained under various state anti-conversion laws. Laws prohibiting cow slaughter also disproportionately affect the country's Muslim, Christian, and Dalit populations and inflame mob violence against individuals accused of eating beef, killing cows, or transporting cattle. In 2023 and early 2024, several mosques have been destroyed under police presence, and vigilante attacked Muslims under the guise of protecting cows from slaughter. Indian authorities have also repeatedly used draconian legislation again, like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, to systematically crack down on religious minorities, activists, and journalists, forcing many of the self-censored their work and the type of reporting they pursue for fear of retaliation or detention. Additionally, last month, the Indian government announced it will replace parts of its criminal code with new legislation which broadens the definition of sedition. The Indian government's increasing use of transnational repression represents an escalation of these efforts to silence religious minorities and advocates operating beyond India's border. The case of Jagtar Singh Johal is one prominent and illustrative example of transnational repression. Johal is a British citizen who, prior to his arrest, was an online activist and contributed to a website that documented human rights violations, including the persecution of Sikhs in India. He was arrested by the authorities while visiting India for his wedding 6 years ago and remains detained in India today. His continued detention sends a chilling message to US-based advocates for religious freedom in India that they may face torture and arbitrary detention as retaliation for their advocacy if they travel to the country. Throughout 2023, USCIRF received credible reports of US citizens and academics being denied entry into India for their work on religious freedom and criticism of the Indian government. In some cases, the Indian government has even penciled overseas citizens of India's status to members of the diaspora. In response and as a precaution, some individuals advocating for religious freedom have opted to keep a lower online profile for fear of online attacks. USCIRF remains deeply concerned about religious freedom conditions in India, including increasing acts of transnational repression. We will continue to raise these issues with the State Department and to make policy recommendations to address these abuses, including by designating India as a CPC and by imposing financial and visa sanctions on individuals and entities responsible for severe violations of religious freedom. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Commissioner Mahmood and USCIRF in his absence. I would like to mention a few names. These are some honorable mentions, folks who have been able to join us. We have Panjit Tejkaran Kaur Bance, who is a legislative assistant representing Congressman Thomas Suozzi's 3rd District from New York. Let's give a round of applause for Mrs. Bance. Thank you so very much for taking the time and being here. This truly means a lot to us. We also have staff members from Congressman Pence's office. These folks have been remarkable today. We truly appreciate their efforts, and we will never forget this day. Thank you so very much. Along with that, we have members of the Sikh community from Indiana, from New York, from New Jersey, from California, from Maryland, from Virginia, from Connecticut, although not a member of the Sikh community, but a good friend of the Sikh community, Peter Frederick. Thank you so very much. We're just about to wrap up our today's program. The next speaker that we have is one of our own, one of the 3 directors here at Sikh Assembly of America. Please help me welcome Simarjot Singh.
Can everybody hear me? Yes. Good? From promoting nationalist paramilitaries to organizing transnational assassinations of religious and political dissidents, the government of India has created a rich and bloody history of itself all around the world. The violent legacies of leaders in the Indian government are not just limited to any one political party, however. Various leaderships throughout the history of India have known to commit violent atrocities and support inhumane legislation in the interests of nationalism. In fact, unclassified intelligence reports from the Library of the U.S. Diplomacy explicitly state, in India, quote, political parties of all stripes at times overlook past human rights violations and crimes committed by candidates in the larger interests of advancing their political agendas. Now we know that the government of India is willing to go to any extent to silence opponents of its nationalist views inside of its territorial bounds. The Congress Party of India, for example, silenced an entire generation, hundreds of thousands of Sikh men, women, and children, the youngest of which was Bibi Waheguru Kaur, who was only 18 days old when she was murdered by the Indian Army during the 1984 attack on Shri Darbar Sahib, the Sikhs' holiest Gurdwara. We also now know that the CIA knew about the realities of the BJP and the RSS for decades and published their true nature in their intelligence reports. A declassified document from the CIA database from 2012 explicitly stated, quote, although the BJP is trying to project an image of secular national party, a substantial element seeks to protect Hindu society, advance Indian domination of the subcontinent, and promote Hindi as the national language. Many members of the BJP were attracted from the former Jan Sangh Party, the political arm of the militant Hindu Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, or the RSS. The currently ruling party in India, the BJP, began its violent legacy at the turn of the century in the late 1990s under Prime Minister Atal Vajpayee. However, the BJP has been reaching new heights in creating its violent history ever since it came into power. By taking advantage of United States President Bill Clinton in the year 2000, a violent, cruel operation was deployed at the turn of the century in the year 2000, which became known as the Chitti Singhpura massacre. This incident occurred as a direct result of President Clinton's delegation traveling to the region of Kashmir. Prior to President Clinton's arrival, 38 innocent Sikhs were taken from a Sikh Gurdwara, lined up, and killed in cold murder. Leading the Indian government, the BJP and Indian intelligence agencies were quick to blame the neighboring country of Pakistan as the culprit, and even attempted to persuade President Clinton into making a statement against the neighboring country of Pakistan. However, the reality of what unfolded as the Chitti Singhpura massacre became exposed at the hands of the Indian government as a deceitful and violent part of the BJP's legacy. In 2017, a retired Indian Army Lieutenant General explained the reality of the events in an interview with Sikh media and explained, quote, President Clinton kicked up a row, saying that due to me a lot of lives have been lost. I want to know exactly what happened, end quote. Luckily, President Clinton himself later went on and clarified what exactly happened. In the introduction of the memoirs of Madeleine Albright, President Clinton's Secretary of State, President Clinton himself originally wrote, quote, during my visit to India in 2000, some Hindu militants decided to vent their outrage by murdering 38 Sikhs in cold blood. If I hadn't made the trip, the victims would probably still be alive. If I hadn't made the trip, because I feared what religious extremists do, I couldn't have done my job as President of the United States. Just 25 years ago, the President of the United States was questioning his job as the leader of this great nation when he was used by the BJP in a plot that murdered these 38 Sikhs outside of India in a small village in Kashmir. Despite experiencing the BJP's bloody legacy firsthand, the United States seemed to have miscalculated their relationship with the authoritarian BJP and its militant wing, the RSS. This miscalculated relation with an authoritarian regime has now unfortunately led to the BJP and the RSS extending its transnational repression and violence right into our home, the United States. The most extreme and recent example of this was just last year, with the BJP and Indian intelligence agencies engaging in a transnational assassination plot against democratic Khalistan leaders, including the murder of Shahid Bhai Avtar Singh Khanda in the UK and Shahid Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada. Shahid Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian citizen and a democratic Khalistan leader, was assassinated on behalf of Indian intelligence agencies commissioned through the Embassy of India on Canadian soil. This multinational assassination plot was orchestrated directly by the Indian regime and was exposed by the United States through the Five Eyes intelligence group. The murder of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar is an extreme matter of religious freedom and a stark reminder of the human rights violations still going on against Americans who follow the Sikh religion. One would think that the BJP and the RSS would stop there, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. According to the United States and the Department of Justice, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his pet intelligence agencies have further been accused of attempting to assassinate another Democratic Khalistan leader by Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, an American lawyer and Sikh leader residing in New York. This time, however, the transnational repression has been directly linked to Prime Minister Modi and his network of raw spies in North America. After getting exposed for multiple threats to the Sikhs and Khalistan leaders in America, the government of India has only increased its crackdown on anyone who opposes them or speaks out the truth. It won't be long before the Indian government comes after me and you for speaking about our freedom and our liberty here in America. These concepts were enshrined into our Constitution and are what sets this country aside from the rest of the world. However, our freedom and liberty is now under attack here in our home. As a student and a concerned citizen of this great nation, I'm questioning all our elected officials, regardless of political ties. How bloody will you make our home? Thank you very much for listening, and I hope we could come to a peaceful solution together in the future. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so very much, Simarjot Singh. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Congressman Pence. Thank you. A big thank you to his staffers as well, who have done a phenomenal job today. Thank you, Peter, for coming out here. Thank you, Reverend Neil Christie. Thank you, Reverend Cook. Thank you, Olivia, for being here from Florida. When I mentioned all other states, I should have mentioned Florida. I love to take vacations down there. Great place to be. And also, thank you, Mr. Ajit Sahi, for helping us achieve this goal today, for being able to express our pain, the pain of the Sikh community that they came to the U.S. 40 years ago, right after 1984. Please help me give a big round of applause to Mr. Ajit Sahi. It's really important for us to note here that the Indian government often puts the narrative, the anti-Sikh riots, which were not riots because it was government-planned attacks. They often say that it's a Hindu versus Sikh problem. It's a majority religion versus minority religion. That is not true. It's the government. It's the regime. Because Mr. Sahi himself is of the Hindu faith, and he's here giving us the voice, lending us his ear. So another round of applause for Mr. Ajit Sahi. Thank you so very much, folks. Thank you for being here. We do have refreshments in the back of the room. We will be here if you would like to chit-chat, and feel free to take pictures. If you have any further questions, please let us know, and let's put our heads together and see how we can make future events even more success. We would like to ask everybody to come up and go ahead and take a group picture so we could go ahead and post it on social media and let the people know that there are the chosen ones, people, as we often say in Punjabi, Jagdi Jameer Wale, that just says the enlightened souls, people who are not sleeping. We would like to go ahead and put everybody up here and take a group picture. Thank you so very much. God bless America.
ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਜੀ। ਅੱਜ ਜੁਲਾਈ 24 2024 ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਆਫ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਤੇ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਤੇ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਸਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਰਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨ ਸੈਨੇਟਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੁਲਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਚਾਨਣਾ ਪਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ, ਬਰੀਫਿੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਟਾਰਗੇਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਾਰਨ ਦੇ ਪਲਾਟ ਬਣਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਜੋ ਵੀ ਬਾਹਰ ਡਾਇਸਪੋਰਾ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਫੈਮਲੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਹੱਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ। ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨ ਗ੍ਰੈਗ ਪੈਂਸ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਏ ਹੋਰ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਟਾਫ ਬਹੁਤ ਆਏ ਆ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਲਦੀ ਤੋਂ ਜਲਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਲਾਅ ਲਿਆਵਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਪਨਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਤੇ ਹਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਲੇ USA ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਥ੍ਰੈਟ ਨਾ ਮਿਲ ਸਕੇ। ਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੀਰ ਪਵਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਭਾਈ ਜੋਗਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ ਤੋਂ ਆਏ ਹੋਰ ਬਹੁਤ ਦੂਰੋਂ ਦੂਰੋਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਆਈਆਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਵੀਰਾਂ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮੱਚ ਜੀ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਜੀ।
ਬੋਲੇ ਸੋਨਿਆ
ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ ਹਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਰੇਬਰਨ ਬਿਲਡਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੇ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਾਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਸਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਰਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਭਾਈ ਖੰਡੇ ਹੋਣਾ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਹੀਦੀ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ, ਭਾਈ ਹਰਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਿੱਜਰ ਹੋਣਾ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਹੀਦੀ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਔਰ ਜੋ ਗੁਰਪਤਵੰਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਪੰਨੂ ਹੋਣਾ ਦਾ ਜਾਨਲੇਵਾ ਹਮਲਾ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਜੱਗ ਜ਼ਾਹਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਸ ਤੇ ਚਾਨਣਾ ਪਾਇਆ। ਜਿੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਲਾਅ ਮੇਕਰਸ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਅਗਲੀ ਪਨੀਰੀ ਵੀ ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਕਿ ਮੰਨੂ ਸਾਡੀ ਦਾਤਰੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੰਨੂ ਦੇ ਸੋਏ ਜਿਉਂ-ਜਿਉਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੱਢਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੂਣ ਸਵਾਏ ਹੋਏ। ਖਾਲਸਾ ਜੀ 40 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਜੂਨ 1984 ਦੇ ਹਮਲੇ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਇਆ। 40 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ 2 ਪੁਸ਼ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਨੇ 2 ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ 20 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਬਦਲ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ। ਸੋ 40 ਸਾਲ 2 ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਹੋ ਗਈਆਂ ਪਰ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਦੀ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਭੁੱਲਣੀ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਾਰਨ ਆਏ ਸੀਗੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਸਟਿਸ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਲੈਣਾ। ਉਹ ਜਸਟਿਸ ਚਾਹੇ ਭਾਈ ਸਤਵੰਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੇਅੰਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਹੋਣੀ ਦਵਾ ਕੇ ਗਏ ਹੋਣ, ਚਾਹੇ ਭਾਈ ਦਿਲਾਵਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਹੋਣੀ ਦਵਾ ਕੇ ਗਏ ਹੋਣ, ਜਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਰੂਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ ਹਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਲੌਬਿੰਗ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਲਾਅ ਮੇਕਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਐਜੂਕੇਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਕੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਕੱਲੀ ਹੁਣ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹਿ ਗਈ। ਜਦ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਦਖਲਅੰਦਾਜ਼ੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਗਣਤੰਤਰ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਰਿਪਬਲਿਕ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਖਤਰਾ ਹੈ, ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਕਨਸਟੀਟਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਰਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿੰਦਿਆਂ ਹੋਇਆਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਕਨਸਟੀਟਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਅਕੋਰਡਿੰਗਲੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਜੋ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਬਤੀਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬੋਲਣ ਦਾ ਹੱਕ ਹੈ। ਜੋ ਬਿੱਲ ਆਫ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਪਹਿਲੀਆਂ 10 ਅਮੈਂਡਮੈਂਟਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਗਰੰਟੀ ਦਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਂਤੀਪੂਰਵਕ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਮੁਹਿੰਮ ਆ ਉਹ ਚਲਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਸਿੱਖ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਆਫ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਇਕੱਠ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਨੈਟੀਕਟ ਤੋਂ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਨਿਊ ਜਰਸੀ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਰੀਲੈਂਡ ਵਰਜੀਨੀਆ ਇੰਡੀਆਨਾ ਕੈਲੀਫੋਰਨੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਨੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਹੁਮ ਹਮਾ ਕੇ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਹੈ। ਉੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਭ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਦਾ ਤਹਿ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦੀ ਹਾਂ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।